What if I told you that England's most powerful queen, the woman celebrated as the Virgin Queen, the legendary Elizabeth I, took with her to the grave a secret so terrifying it was never allowed to appear in any official history book? Behind the carefully painted white mask and glittering gowns, her body was not a temple of power and beauty, but a ruin, poisoned, deformed, decaying. And when her attendants prepared her for burial, what they discovered was so horrific, so politically dangerous, that it was buried not once, but twice once in her coffin, and once in the silence of every witness who swore never to speak. The greatest mystery of all still lies sealed under Westminster Abbey today. This is not merely the story of a queen's death. It is the collapse of a myth, a lie that held an empire together. Picture the scene. The year is 1603. At Richmond Palace, heavy velvet curtains block the morning Sunday candles, sputter and throw uneasy shadows across the polished floor. Elizabeth I, once the radiant Gloriana, lies motionless on her bed. She had been a ruler who transformed England into a world power, a monarch who inspired poets like Spenser and terrified rivals like Philip II of Spain. Now, the woman who seemed immortal in portraits lies pale and shrunken, her face no longer the living symbol of a golden age, but a waxen mask of death. Her lips are cracked and bleeding. The brilliant eyes that once commanded armies stare at nothing at all. Doctors hover nervously at the edges of the chamber. Formally, no autopsy will be permitted. Kings and queens were not cut open like commoners. Yet already the court is abuzz with rumor. In her last days, Elizabeth had terrified even her most loyal servants. She refused food, refused to sleep, refused even to sit down. She muttered strange words in Latin, laughed at nothing, flinched at the touch of a hand. Some whispered she had gone mad. Others suspected poison. No one knew the truth. What they were about to see would confirm the darkest whispers and inspire even darker ones. As the attendants unfastened the corset that had bound her body for decades, a foul odor spread through the chamber, an unmistakable smell of rot. Beneath the embroidered silk and velvet, her skin was bruised, blistered, mottled with black and green spots, like fruit left to decay in the sunday. Her chest and abdomen bore wounds, long concealed, some scabbed, others still seeping blood. These horrors had been hidden beneath layers of perfume, powder, and the suffocating pressure of her garments. One doctor recoiled in shock. Another crossed himself, whispering prayers. They had not uncovered the corpse of a queen. They had uncovered a woman who had been dying, slowly and silently, for years, even as she danced in courtly masks, thundered in Parliament, and projected an image of divine invincibility. Elizabeth had always understood the importance of appearances. In an age when monarchs claimed to rule by God's will, weakness of the body could be seen as weakness of the crown. Thus, she built her myth with almost theatrical precision. Her face was never seen without its white mask, her body never without the towering gowns and stiff corsets that both glorified and concealed. But now, in the dim chamber of Richmond, that mask was stripped away. Her attendants began the ritual preparations for burial, removing the jewels, the wig, the silks. When they pressed warm cloths to her face, something terrible happened. The famous alabaster white complexion, celebrated in portraits and poetry, peeled away in ribbons, like wallpaper lifting from a damp wall. What lay beneath silenced the room. Her face was discolored and misshapen, patches of blackened skin and ruptured blisters spreading across her cheeks and forehead. Some flesh had hardened into leathery crust, while other areas seeped with blood and pus. The illusion of beauty, which had enchanted diplomats and poets for 4 decades, was revealed as a mask of poison. For what Elizabeth had worn daily was not simply makeup, it was Venetian ceruse, a deadly blend of lead carbonate and vinegar. This cosmetic, fashionable across Europe, gave the skin a ghostly glow, but also slowly killed the wearer, cell by poisoned cell. Historians now know she reapplied it fresh every single day for more than 40 years. It thinned the skin, corroded the flesh, and infiltrated the blood. Under the rouge and powder, her hairline had receded far back, revealing a skull marked by sores and lesions. Beneath the myth of Gloriana, there was only ruin. And here lies the cruel irony. Elizabeth was no fool. Surviving notes and letters hint that she had been warned by her physicians, perhaps more than once, of the dangers of her cosmetic ritual. Yet she never stopped. For the mask was not vanity alone, it was her power. To remove it would have been to reveal her weakness, her mortality, her humanity. Better to die a legend than to live exposed. And so, she chose the mask, even knowing the cost. As the room filled with the smell of decay, those present realized they were witnessing not just the death of a monarch, but the unmasking of a lie. The Queen who had defied the Spanish Armada, who claimed to be married to England itself, who had cultivated an image of eternal youth and purity, had in truth been rotting away beneath the paint and velvet for years. It was a revelation too dangerous to record, too destabilizing to speak aloud. It remained a secret, buried under layers of silence. Yet the horrors did not end with her face. When her body was inspected further quietly, unofficially, behind locked doors, doctors found signs of something even stranger, something that would haunt whispers for centuries. Her inner organs were failing in ways no one could understand, her very flesh betraying the toll of poison and time. But that revelation belongs to the next chapter. Behind locked doors at Richmond Palace, the ritual of secrecy deepened. Officially, there was no autopsy yet in truth. The physicians examined her remains in terrified silence. What they discovered was nothing like what they had learned from their books of Galen or their manuals of humors. Her body defied their understanding of life itself. Her liver, the organ once believed to hold the essence of vitality, was as hard as stone, shrunken and blackened like coal. Her kidneys felt brittle, like parchment left too long in a fire, useless fragments where life had once flowed. When her abdomen was opened, not the ordinary odor of death, but a sharp, metallic stench filled the chamber. The doctors gagged, eyes watering. At the base of her spine pooled a thick, tar-like substance, clinging like glue to the surrounding tissue. One physician tried to scoop it into a vial for study, but the mysterious fluid clung stubbornly to his gloves, resisting capture as if it had a life of its own. In an age without microscopes, they had no language for it. Some called it black bile. Others whispered simply, the rot within. Modern science, centuries later, would offer a clearer diagnosis: catastrophic lead poisoning. Not only from her daily cosmetics, but from her medicine, many of which also contained toxic metals, and even from the goblets and plates used by the wealthy, often glazed with lead. Her flesh and blood had become a slow battlefield, corroded cell by cell, until the organs collapsed in grotesque failure. Elizabeth hadn't merely died. She had unraveled. But her suffering was not confined to hidden organs. As the physicians traced the outline of her frame, another horror emerged. Her spine curved unnaturally to one side, each vertebra pressing through her wasted skin like crooked stones. Decades of corsets and ceremonial stillness had left her shoulders sloping unevenly, her ribs twisted and collapsing inward. This was not the posture of regal portraits. It was the broken architecture of a body forced to play a role it could no longer bear. And then they found it. Near her left breast, a swollen mass, ulcerated and oozing blood and pus. The flesh around it inflamed and rotting. Was it cancer, a disease unnamed and unknown in her time? Or a festering infection bound and hidden with bandages for years? Whatever it was, Elizabeth had concealed it even from her doctors, a private agony carried in silence while she ruled with iron authority. The most unsettling discovery came when their eyes turned to the womb of the Virgin Queen. For a monarch celebrated as eternally chaste, her uterus carried the most symbolic weight. What the physicians described in hushed tones was a shriveled, parchment-like organ, collapsed entirely, almost indistinguishable from surrounding tissue. To the men of the 17th century, it seemed divine confirmation of her chastity. But to modern medicine, it suggests another truth. Perhaps Elizabeth suffered from an undiagnosed disorder, Turner syndrome, premature ovarian failure, or a hormonal imbalance that robbed her of fertility. She had always declared she was married to England, but perhaps the choice had not been hers to make. Her lifelong virginity, her refusal to wed, her bursts of rage and moments of strange illness, these may all have been the shadow of a biological destiny rather than divine will. The political myth of virginity might have been a mask no less deceptive than her painted face. And yet, even that was not the most shocking rumor whispered after her death. Among attendants, fragments of a darker story emerged. Some said her limbs were too long, her ribcage too broad, her hips too narrow for a woman. Others murmured that her anatomy did not seem entirely female at all. This fed a legend already circulating in taverns, the Bisley Boy tale that Elizabeth had died as a child and been replaced by a boy to shield the Tudors from Henry VIII's wrath. Most historians dismiss this as folklore, but the secrecy surrounding her body, the closed coffin, the hurried embalming, these left the story to fester like an open wound in English memory. When portraits from her later years increasingly showed square jaws, broad shoulders, and a flat chest, conspiracy only grew stronger. Was this merely the ravages of age, or a truth carefully hidden by the crown? Whatever the case, one fact is certain. The panic that gripped the court after her death was real. The instant Elizabeth breathed her last, the machinery of state shifted into crisis mode. Guards sealed her chamber. Attendants were dismissed or reassigned to distant corners of the kingdom. Doctors swore oaths of silence under threat of death. No word of her deformities, her madness, or her decay could be allowed to reach the public. For Elizabeth was more than a queen. She was the very face of Protestant England. For 45 years she had stood as the bulwark against Catholic resurgence. To admit she had died, deformed, diseased, or possibly even less than fully, woman would have been catastrophic. Enemies abroad would seize upon it as proof that her reign was cursed by God. The Protestant succession, already fragile, might crumble before James VI of Scotland could secure the throne. And so, silence became doctrine. The Virgin Queen's final truth was sealed away, embalmed, entombed, buried beneath layers of ceremony and myth. Centuries later, modern science has tried to pierce the silence. Researchers have studied her portraits, her funeral effigy, her preserved gowns. CT scans of the effigy reveal a slanted jaw, uneven shoulders, a neck bent unnaturally to one side, signs of scoliosis worsened by crushing garments. Chemical analysis of her cosmetics confirms terrifying levels of lead carbonate. From these fragments, historians piece together an image of chronic suffering, migraines, nausea, organ pain, neurological collapse, hidden behind a facade of majesty. And yet, the ultimate answers remain locked away. Every request to exhume her tomb in Westminster Abbey has been denied. Her coffin remains untouched, sealed under centuries of stone and silence. But the silence itself speaks. Letters burned, diaries destroyed, servants vanishing into obscurity. Accounts of her burial hinting at extraordinary measures, an unusually reinforced coffin, padded and sealed, never again to be opened. Why this obsessive secrecy? Because Elizabeth's body was more than a corpse. It was the foundation of a national myth, the symbol of divine power, the justification for empire. To expose the truth would be to question not just her legacy, but the legitimacy of everything built upon it, the Protestant monarchy, the Tudor dynasty, even the birth of the British Empire. And so, her secrets remain entombed. Some whisper that in her final moments she confessed something devastating, perhaps a hidden illness, perhaps a genetic curse, perhaps something unthinkable about her very identity. We may never know. What we do know is that Elizabeth Tudor, the Virgin Queen, did not merely die. She unraveled into silence, her flesh consumed by poison, her womb shriveled to dust, her legacy shielded by lies. 4 centuries later, the stone of Westminster still guards her final secret, and perhaps it always will, for some truths are too dangerous for kingdoms to survive.